It's the Final Word Daily, brought to you as ever by Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City. I'm Cameron Ponsonby and I'm joined today by ESPN Cricinfo's Karthik Krishnaswamy, who has fed me brain on this trip. He's told me off for eating chili paneer in the west of India rather than the east. But most importantly, he's joined us for the fourth and hopefully fifth test. Karthik, welcome. There's been some news to kind of build towards the fourth test. This is, of course, our kind of India-focused episode. The biggest news out of the India camp today is, or yesterday even, is Jasprit Bumrah not going to be here in Ranchi.
Yeah, so, I mean, he was expected to rest and sit out at least one of the tests. And could have been Rajkot, turns out it's this one. And I think the timings, it works well for India and him now that they're 2-1 up. And Dharamshala is, I mean, the only test match that was played there was quite a bit in it for the fast bowlers. There's some bounce there and like, so India would want him there. So they'll have him fit and well rested, hopefully.
So why was it this test? Because there was rumours they wanted to miss out on the third one, and it was a case of kind of like, mate, we need you. Like it's 1-1, can get another game into you. And where does it come from? Is it Bumrah himself saying he wants to be rested, or is it BCCI being like, you've had your injuries, we need to look after you?
I have a feeling it's the team management who like looking long term, and he's also like come back from a couple of back stress reactions. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it comes from him specifically, but it's a sort of collective decision that, you know, let's not play him in all 5 tests. It's a long series.
And now we were going to do the pitch later, but I think Bumrah being absent kind of plays into what we're hearing about the wicket that's being prepared here. We've just spoken to Ollie Pope. India was speaking about half an hour, I imagine. Ollie Pope is saying there's been kind of plates on the wicket and they're expecting a wicket that's going to spin a bit more, which you would expect if one team was missing their premier seamer, because you go, well, we had a massive advantage in having arguably the best seamer in the world. We don't have that advantage anymore. We're going to bring our other spinners into play. What does Bumrah's absence mean for the makeup of the team? Are India potentially going to bring in a spinner for Bumrah, or is Mukesh Kumar back in the squads, my favourite player of all time, or could it even be a debut for Akashdeep?
It could be a lot of things. My feeling is they'd probably stick to 2 seamers, because you've got 3 world-class spinners and they can bowl quite a lot. Like even last year when India were playing Australia and they were playing 3 spinners in all tests, even on turning tracks, it felt like the third spinner Akshar wasn't bowling all that much. So then you bring a 4th one in and you're like, do we have one too many? And,
sure.
So there's a chance of that happening, and I also think with reverse swing potentially coming into play, and like the fast bowlers, they know how to bowl on these kinds of pitches. They know how to get something out of them, as you saw in Rajkot as well, especially how Siraj bowled there and with the reverse swing on offer. So I think, you know, since they already have 3 spinners, 4 could be a bit much, but then again they could be like, why not?
Sure.
It lengthens their batting as well to bring in Akshar Patel, so that might be something they'd think about.
And from a seamer's point of view, so Mukesh Kumar obviously had a torrid test match over in Vizag, but he went back to his Ranchi State team and took 10 for 50 across the match. I was joyous. Will he come straight back in? Is it just a straight swap, or do you reckon Akash might be getting the nod?
If they do play 2 seamers, I expect it to be Mukesh, especially after the 10 for. The only thing I'd say is that I watched like a highlights clip of his bowling, and that pitch looked quite green.
Perfect.
Which is not what this is.
Not what's going to be. The other kind of potential change for India's team does surround Patidar at number 5. Patidar's test in Rajkot was the test that Mukesh Kumar had in Vizag. 2 horrible dismissals. He chipped one to mid-wicket in the second innings, or pulled it straight to Rayan Ahmed, and Ben Stokes was laughing at point, which I think is going to be the worst feeling ever for an athlete. Does he survive? Does Padikkal come in? Or do India go, right, I know that technically he is a spinner, but Akshar Patel, as you said, strengthens the batting. He averages about, I think it's 50 million in India in the last couple of years. What are we expecting in that respect for India's middle order?
I think Patidar will get another game. I say this also because he looked good in that first innings he played in Vizag.
Okay, I thought you were going to say in Rajkot. I was there. You can't lie to me.
Right, and those 2 dismissals, it's like freakish.
Sure.
what do you do when you, especially the first innings? I thought he looked worse than like how much he was culpable for it. The ball stopped on him. It turned out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And
But I was wondering with that because I was very sympathetic to Patidar because I was like, oh, it's 33 for 3. It's a difficult wicket. Like, what can you do? And then Jadeja and Jaiswal put on about 7 million. And
Yeah.
so I was like, well, it looks a bit worse for you, Patidar, now, to be honest.
yeah,
Sharma
but
anyway.
that pitch, the first session alone, there was quite a bit of moisture in it, right?
Sure.
And it did a few funny things, and then it settled down. And he was unfortunate to lose his wicket in that time to a ball like that.
So we're expecting Patidar to keep his place in a case of straight swap for Mukesh in for Bumrah. The wicket here, to go back again, so Ollie Pope was quite interesting in, he said it basically, it's split in half. He's saying half the wicket looks quite good and half the wicket looks quite difficult. Plating. Longitudinally, very crucially. Someone asked a very interesting question in the press conference. I don't know who it was. And as Karthik's saying, it's longitudinally, it's lengthways. So rather than it being a particular length, to use a confusing word in that instance, where on a good length it's difficult to play on, he's saying from the end that's closest to us, if you're watching on YouTube, it's just outside the right-hander's off stump, and then from the other end it's outside the left-hander's off stump. I think I've got that correct.
I think so.
And so what he's saying is that will make it difficult in terms of you've got to be aware that Ashwin is probably going to bowl over the wicket to you rather than round the wicket to you, and how you kind of combat the plans that you're going to come up against given where the difficult parts of the pitch are. He's also worried that India are going to have a chance to look at the pitch later on today and potentially tailor it to however they wish. But I thought it was quite interesting in terms of the kind of English narrative, or kind of not necessarily English but outside India narrative, is if you make shit heaps it turns it into a lottery and anyone can bowl on it. But actually one of my takeaways from Ollie Pope saying, right, these are the difficult areas of the pitch and Ashwin will then bowl over the wicket to you, is that makes me go, oh, Ashwin has to be able to kind of use the relevant skills to make the most of it. Are we expecting India to kind of hit the accelerator button on this wicket and in Bumrah's absence make it the spinning wicket that it sounds like it's going to be, or is there a chance they rein back and say, actually, can you try and firm up those plates and we want a bit of a flatter one?
So it's not an exact science, right?
Sure.
And there's like what you wish for and what you end up with. I think last year in Nagpur was a classic sort of example of that, where, I mean, it was written about all over the place and everyone was shouting themselves hoarse before the match began of like how it's a designer pitch with like no grass outside the left-handers off stump and like only on the spinner's good length but not on the seamer's good length and all of that, right? It looked like that. It really did look like that, but it ended up playing not normally. It was a turning track, a sharply turning track, but it was slow and like India made 400.
Yeah.
Right. So I think India would wish for a little more like spin from the start here than they've had in this series so far, especially Vizag and Rajkot. They'd wish for that. So I would imagine that they'll try as much as possible to make that happen.
To talk about two of India's kind of superstars of the last test, well, one superstar, one debutant who did very well, Sarfaraz Khan and Jaiswal. You wrote excellent pieces on both of them. There was an amazing moment when they were kind of, Jaiswal got his 200, Sarfaraz got his 50 in the second innings. They had a big hug, two boys from Mumbai. Jaiswal's just batted phenomenally well. He obviously had the kind of boy wonder kind of reputation, but surely even India are surprised at how well he's adapted and how dominant he's been in this series.
Yeah, I mean, from the time he's played his first test, it's like he just knows how to bat in any situation, right? There's no like, what kind of batter is Jaiswal? It's kind of hard to say. He can do everything, seemingly. And what's his trademark shot? Hard to say again, right? And there's a lovely simplicity to his technique. He just seems to be in the right place without, I don't know, like, obviously I haven't like looked so closely into his technique or like spoken to people about it, but it's not like he has a complicated trigger movement, or he just seems to bat.
Sure.
And for now that just seems to be working brilliantly for him. And yeah, I think he just has a really old head on his shoulders, and you can see in how He's adapted his game to different pitches, different situations.
It's the simplicity that really strikes me, and just in terms of as soon as anything gets remotely full, he hits it so far. And those hat-trick of sixes against Anderson, one over deep square leg, one over extra cover, one straight. Kind of, where can you bowl to this guy? It seems that he's a batter that kind of dictates length as opposed to line. I was talking to one friend / colleague who, with a kind of bit of a slightly tongue-in-cheek, went, well, he's only really faced two seamers with the new ball once when he was nipping around, and Mark got him out and didn't do very well in South Africa. And that was, I thought, one of the most negative thought processes of all time. To talk about kind of, there was some thinking after the first and second test, and you had KL Rahul out, who's again going to miss this test match, which was a surprise. I think you were mentioning that there was an expectation he'd been fit for Rajkot, let alone Ranchi. But with Kohli out, with KL Rahul out, with Jadeja injured, with all these players kind of falling over, there was a desire, or potentially even more calls from the English media than the Indian, to be like, why not pick Pujara? Where's Rahane? Pujara in particular, because he's having such a good domestic season. And I was talking to one of the Indian journalists, and he kind of rolled his eyes a bit and went, no, like, these guys have had their chance, and you have to give the opportunity to the next generation. And I've always been very sceptical of that opinion in elite sports. Kind of, surely until you're not good enough, you deserve to be there, which could be the case for Pujara. But what we've seen in this series, particularly with Sarfaraz Khan and Jaiswal, is that these guys were more than good enough to have been holding these spots for however long. And then with Patidar's place under threat, who's the person who's knocking on the door? It's Padikkal. He's got 3 tons in his last 4 matches, a kind of IPL superstar. From your own opinion, coming into this series, when those runs were drying up, were you of the opinion that India should potentially turn back to Pujara as kind of the older, wiser head? Or were you agreeing that this was the time finally for Sarfaraz Khan and Padikkal and Jaiswal to take the mantle forward?
I was honestly going either way would have been sound.
Yeah.
Like the guys who are coming in, they're so good. You've seen how good they are. So even Patidar, like, you know, when he got that 100 in that IPL qualifier or eliminator, whatever it was, stunning innings, right? And he just looked like, you know, looked so comfortable against pace, spin. Of course, it was the IPL T20,
Sure.
Nothing like this. But you expect someone who looked that good in that match to, against this England bowling attack, to score runs, right? And the pitches haven't been, you know, minefields either. So given all that, I think it was wise. Even then, it felt like, you know, that there was also this school of thought that India were perhaps like dialing down on the turning tracks because of the inexperience in their batting. And so having made that decision that, look, we're going to give these guys as much of a chance as they need, I don't think going like, you know, making a U-turn midway through the series would have made any sense.
Sure.
So if they'd made the decision before the series that no, for this one last home series, important long series against England, we need a bit of experience without Kohli in there, and okay, let's go back to Pujara, that would have been a sound decision too. But having not taken that decision, they just stuck with it.
This match is potentially the end of the series as a competition, which is really, I've actually really only just kind of realised that now, because it's been so much fun. And that was my favourite thing about England winning the first match. Not anything to do with kind of patriotism or whatever. It was like, we have 3 live test matches at the very least, because there's no way England's winning 3-0. India could wrap up the series this week. I think we'd be of the same opinion in that you want the live series for as long as possible. You want to get to Dharmashala at 2-2 because it would just be so exciting. After India won by 434 runs a matter of days ago, obviously the main talking point of India's largest margin of victory in history in terms of runs is the fact that a few marginal umpiring decisions went against England. They were robbed, it was a disgrace, and DRS is corrupt. I know you think all those things. What has been the Indian reaction to kind of how that's kind of taken the part of the narrative that England fell by the wayside so far, but the talk, and I must admit I'm kind of guilty of it as well, and sort of fixating on it a little bit.
You made it all happen.
I know, it's very
asking
exciting.
Stokes that question, right?
It was very. I had a very surreal moment where I was so I wrote a piece that's be coming out in a couple of hours for a newspaper back in England, and I was quoting the interview for the other employer I did, and I was like, I'm creating my own eco-cycle, which is a good or bad thing, who knows. What's been the kind of Indian takeaway of what are these guys doing? How has this become a talking point? Because Stokes is saying that there's one thing to doubt umpire's call because you think the technology is really accurate and so we don't need it anymore. It's quite another to say, I don't believe the technology for no particular reason at all. Because there's nothing to say that Hawkeye is faulty in any way, shape or form.
And even the decisions that England have been, a little bit annoyed with were marginal. They weren't like, you've seen back in the day, like a few years ago, like someone missing a sweep and the ball seems to be going with the angle, but Hawkeye shows it turning and missing off stump. It wasn't anything like that, right? Like, it was just marginal. You're like, oh, I thought that might probably miss, but it was umpire's call. That happens.
Sure.
Right? I just think the team management, they're very smart with how they handle the media. They feed you guys like, all of this stuff about, look, Jaiswal learned how to bat watching us. They feed this stuff about, it was like Hawkeye that, lost us this game and stuff. And that's stopping a lot of the media from asking, the questions about why they're actually losing this series so far. It could change. I don't expect it to. But the reason is basically that their bowling isn't going to take 20 wickets unless, something like Hyderabad happens and the pitch did start turning quite a bit towards the end. And he Hartley bowled really well. He really did as well. So it could happen on like a turning track. It could happen here. But otherwise, like if Joe Root is bowling a third, okay, not a third, but as many of their overs as he's bowling, how are they going to like beat a team with Ashwin in it, with Jadeja in it, with Kuldeep Yadav and Bumrah in it? How? So that's the question at the start of the series. It remains the question now is like, can England challenge India with the ball enough? And they've not been able to do that.
I think it's interesting when it goes back to the kind of narrative that was existing at the start of the series when there was expectation or suspicion that there might be a lot of turning wickets, or then you bring in England's spinners, inexperienced spinners who are just worse than Ashwin and Jadeja, because Ashwin and Jadeja are the best in the world, which is why you could argue it's quite interesting that we might be getting a turning wicket here. I think on the front of, I was talking to your colleague Vish Hantharajah yesterday about this, and I was saying I'm worried I'm getting guilty of, when I'm in the room with McCullum, for instance, who spoke after the Rajat Test, like he speaks and I find myself nodding and I'm like, I get it, I buy into it, and then I read the quotes afterwards and I go, what the fuck are we talking about? Like, and I think it's kind of, Vish actually tempered my concerns, because he said, I think that's important to remember, because this message is for the people in the 15 people in the room, and they do buy into it. It is. It's been referred to as a cult back at home a few times, and I don't think that's too far away from the truth. But some cults are very, very popular and fun.
They're popular, and also like after the Duckett press conference in Rajkot, I was like, this man is an ideologue of baseball, right? Because he fully buys into it, and guess what? It's helped him, because his game is such that to be mentally free to like go, right, this is what I'm good at, and they want me to do what I'm good at, and I'm going to like get even better at those things and double down, right? And it's worked for him. He's averaging how much in this regime, and how good is he looking? Like, so clear in his thought, and like even before he got that 100, the way he was like cutting India's fast bowlers even when there was hardly any width, and he's always giving England such good starts. He was batting really well even before that 100. So there's a reason why he's bought into it so much, and it's helping him. But yeah, like when he talks about it, there's a reason why he talks about it the way he does. But like, it's important, I feel, to kind of like take a broader perspective on it as the media.
I think it's interesting because in terms of when Duckett, I think, is guilty is not the right word, but I'm going to use it anyway, of, is he saying these things because it's a distraction tactic or whatever, or does he just not, he's just, I don't care. He's like, because I think when Duckett says these things, he's like, India should thank us for Jaiswal. Like, he's kind of smiling whilst
There's
he
no
does
way
it.
he believes that. No way at all.
No,
He
not
just
at all.
he had a smile on his face. Come on. Yeah.
And I think he is someone whose quotes look so different written down to when you're in the room and he says it, and you kind of like, he gives it a wink like, oh, we'll chase anything. The more the better. That's not how the sport works, Benjamin. But and he knows that because he plays for England and he's very, very good. I think that's enough. After everything from us, I was going to say that's enough, which sounded too negative. That's everything from us today. Karthik will be back with us before the 5th test. We are here at Ranchi, ready to go for the 4th test, which starts in 2 days. As ever, it's brought to you by Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City. I've been Cameron, he's been Karthik. Thank you very much.